It's SJG D2 HBCU football.
Sleep on Livingstone if you want to, and they can really punish you for it.
Valdosta State, they're never sexy, but they won.
Sometimes we have to eat our crow, and I got to eat my crow this week, okay?
Doom alert. Yeah, we're back at Heartbreak Hotel, and we're checking back in.
What's up, good people? It's SJG, and welcome to HBCU Gameday Live on a Wednesday. And look, guys, I'll have to start off apologizing and put my Anita Baker hat on. I said 7:15. We like to start promptly here. We had a lot going on. It's been a lot going on over the last couple of days. You might have heard some folks got relieved, other folks didn't get renewed, and other folks, we don't really know what happened. I will just be honest. But one thing that we do know is that you're watching the HBCU Game Day Live. This is normally where we do the D2 show, but tonight the lines are a little bit blurred. We're definitely going to go talk about Division II for sure. So we're going to talk about Virginia Union and this marvelous run that they have been on over the last couple of weeks now in the NCAA Division II playoffs. We've got someone who's been following that closely, who's been there for every touchdown, every Jada Bowers big big runs too. Hey, and then we also got, of course, a lot of coaching changes, coaching job openings on the Division II level that are already there, some that probably will be soon, and a ton of them we don't really know. It could be somebody new next year. It couldn't be. But what we do know right now is that earlier this week, broke the news that a movement was going on with Vincent Brown to remove him as head football coach of North Carolina A&T. And I put that report out on Tuesday. Spent a couple of days doing the reporting. And, just kind of making sure that, before you put this type of stuff out there, you definitely want to be sure that what you're putting out there is real, it's accurate, and you don't overrepresent it. So that article came out on Tuesday. And, of course, today, which is Wednesday, the official announcement came that Vincent Brown had been relieved of his duties. Now, when it comes to being, a lot of people like to play with the words, but when they relieve you, before your contract is up, you're fired. So he was fired from North Carolina A&T, and one of the folks that helped me do a lot of reporting on it and checking and verifying with sources and helped out a lot. He's going to come on and he's going to talk about that move and some others. He's going to stick around with some of the D2 fun as well with myself and Kris Ferguson. So without any further ado, I want to bring on a mentor of mine, a legend in the game, a giant in the game, and he's not just sitting up there resting on his mountaintop. He's still out here, pounding the pavement, asking coaches the tough questions, checking people at the press conference if he needs to when they're asking questions and they're not media. He is the one and only Lut Williams, and we will welcome Lut, who's no stranger to HBCU Gameday. Lut, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing fine, Steve. How about you, man? Doing fine.
I'm doing good. I haven't been relieved. So I'm doing just fine.
You're not you're not on the hot seat, huh?
I don't think so. I'm gonna turn the space heater on in a little bit if it gets any colder. We had some snow the other day, so I'm rolling with it. But we're talking but obviously some big news officially broke today, but I know you and we've been talking about it the last couple of days. That is the news that that Vincent Brown is no longer the head coach at North Carolina A&T. Lut, I know I was just thinking the other day, it hasn't even been a whole 2 years since Sam Washington got off the hook at North Carolina A&T, since he was fired, with a year left on his deal. And, you and I have been following this since then. A lot of people never really seem to get over that.
Yeah, and the Aggies in particular, the Aggie faithful, I guess when you start talking about around the black college world. You talk about FAMU, that is known to make quick decisions. Uh, Maybe even Jackson State, to a degree, has made quick decisions. They've gone through a lot of coaches during their tenure. A&T has had their ups and downs. They can be very up with the Roy Broadway. They were very down with Lee Fobbs. They got back up with Bill Hayes. They went back down with several coaches between he and by the time the Broadway got there. So this trend or downstroke, you may call it, over the last 2 years was just very, very hard for the Aggies to swallow, particularly when you can consider with the moves that they've made, leaving from Broadway, going to Sam Washington, and now to Vincent Brown. And obviously, what has over that span is going from the MEAC conference, where they had made multiple appearances in the Celebration Bowl, all of them winning appearances in the Celebration Bowl, to going to the Big South for a little while, not winning any championships there, and then going to the CAA over these last 2 years, and basically not yet winning a CAA game in two years was too much for the Aggie faithful to follow. And as you reported, a lot of this change coming about had to do with boosters and supporters coming to the table and saying, listen, we'll do whatever is necessary to get him out of here. And though we're still trying to get the details about what kind of buyout, because I have to assume that it was certainly a buyout to get Vincent Brown to leave, we do believe that it was a booster-led, alumni-led movement to really get him out, because my information said, and I put in a call to Earl Hilton, the athletic director at A&T. He didn't return my call, but the information I got from inside them, that last week they were saying there was going to be no change at A&T, that he was expected to be back. So over the course of the weekend, it looks like a groundswell of non-support came about, and support to say, let's get him out of here and get somebody in here who we think can return the Aggies to their winning ways. And that's exactly what happened. And you see it culminated today with the announcement from the school that he's out.
Yeah, again, great information there. Again, Lut's been covering North Carolina A&T a lot longer than I have, just a little bit. So, he definitely has seen the ebbs and flows of North Carolina A&T football. And yeah, you're right. I do fondly, as a Ram, remember the Lee Fobbs era. I do. But no, seriously, obviously, covering A&T over the last decade, as HBCU Gameday has grown, obviously, with Rod Broadway and Sam Washington, things really picked up there. And then all the changes that were made, and to see the things that happened the last couple of years, it was a pretty sharp fall off. I mean, you look at
Absolutely.
it,
Absolutely. And keep in mind, you talk about the Rams, the only game that Vincent Brown and the Aggies won this year. And I'm only saying this because for all practical purposes, Winston-Salem State outplayed them in that game. Winston-Salem State should have won that game. That was the only win they got all year. And I mean, I think you probably are satisfied that Robert Massey has appeared to be turning the corner with the Rams. They were a contender. But my point is that he could very easily have been 0-12, and it might not have taken 2 or 3 weeks after the season was over. Had they been 0-12 and lost to a Division II Winston-Salem State team, it probably would have been even a greater groundswell to get him out.
Yeah, I was in the stadium that day. You were in the press box. So, there were a lot of anxious puppies over there at North Carolina A&T. That game, especially the week before, they felt like they turned the corner against Wake Forest. They went in only down a small margin. I had been at that game, and Coach Brown felt optimistic that things were turning around. These Aggies were talking junk to me, talking about they're going to put 60 points on WSSU and all this stuff. Yeah, I didn't forget that. And that did not happen. They did escape with the win, and there was a little bit of optimism there. There were some tense smiles and some okay, and then they got that win, but that was the only win that they got, including losses to not one, not two, but three former MEAC foes. One of them is now in the CAA, and all of those, I think maybe those were the most drastic beatings that they took. When you talk
Yep.
about North Carolina Central putting 66 up on them, South Carolina State having their way with them in the second half, and then the Jiho disaster. That one with Hampton just pulverizing them. I didn't go see them anymore after that WSSU game. You saw some of those games, and you and I have been in the press conferences though. Very tense. A lot of people had a lot to say. A lot of stuff was bubbling right there between the surface, and sometimes it bubbled over. But you and I both sat in the press conference and heard Earl Hilton talk about how he had the confidence in him, and he audibly said that. And we're talking about wasn't that long ago. We're talking about like a month ago. This is pretty stunning.
Absolutely. At a press conference, one of the ardent Aggie supporters asked him, "Do you think you're the man for the job?" And he said, without question. And Earl Hilton, who happened to be there at the press conference on that Monday press conference, said, "And I do too," expressing his support. And again, the reports that I got, even last week, he was still in the corner of Vincent Brown, thinking that with the transition to the CAA, a new coach coming in, guys leaving from the transfer portal, some of his main guys losing them to the transfer portal over the last couple of years. It was just a matter of him getting his feet under him. I think when he was hired, having that he had experience in the CAA, I think Earl Hilton thought it would be a very good hire that would pay off in short order. So no, the Aggie, and as you know, on the Monday press conferences where he comes in, he's tried to be very optimistic, talking about, we've only been this far. We've lost our starting quarterback. We lost our two starting running backs. We're down this many people, but we hung with people in the first half. And listen, the bottom line is the devoted Aggies didn't want to hear that. That's not what they wanted to hear, that, we were in it at halftime. They wanted to see some W's, and obviously 2 of them over the last 2 years was not enough for them.
Yes, Troy, you're the one who promised me that y'all were going to put 60 on us. And yeah, maybe by the time we get to 2060, we'll get those 60 points. You got it in women's basketball. Cute. Anyway, yeah, so, you talk about Earl Hilton, and, we'll see what the future holds for him. I mean, those were pretty strong endorsements. And then, to have to go reverse course this quickly, this publicly, after you made those comments so publicly, kind of leads you to wonder. I said today that, there is, the chancellor's name in North Carolina A&T, his last name is still Martin, but his first name ain't Harold.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the much of the talk about who's going to replace him, and I don't know if you wanted to get into this, but I'm sure you don't have a problem with it. Sean Gibbs is the name that's coming up, and everybody is saying, and we've gotten some reports that they're already in touch with Sean Gibbs, and it's almost like a done deal. Sean Gibbs, for those who don't know, is a former running backs coach at A&T. He coached Tariq Cohen, as well as a number of the A&T backs that have done very, very well, both on the collegiate level, and Tariq, and one that went on to the NFL. He's done a very good job over the last 2 years at Fort Valley State. He's from the Rod Broadway tree, so to speak, that included the Sam Washingtons, the Trey Olivers of the world, the coach Courtney Cords of the world, the defensive coordinator under both Sam Washington and Broadway, that's now at North Carolina Central. So he is a connection to that very successful history of A&T over the past few years before these last couple of years. So if that is in the deal, and from what the information I'm getting, It's almost a done deal already. That's going to be very interesting to see who he brings to his staff. Because again, that's one of the things that they also complained about. They complained about he changed offensive coordinators after the first year. Vincent Brown did. He changed defensive coordinators, and they were saying, the man was not familiar with this territory. And despite the fact that he had a great resume, having been on the Division I level and the FBS level, have won the FCS championship with Mike London at Richmond, supposedly he had the resume that you would expect he could come in and win. But, the bottom line is, and I asked this question towards the end of the year, he said when he took the job that he thought he had what was there already at A&T to compete in the CAA based on what he knew. And the bottom line is that's not the case. Even even without the injuries, it would have been very, very difficult for him to be a significant player in the CAA over these last 2 years.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely talk about Sean Gibbs a little bit. We'll go ahead and throw this one out there before we pull Kris in and talk some Virginia Union, and then we'll get back to the coach of Carousel. Yes, Lut is the GOAT. We'll get back to the coach at Carousel after that, but do want to touch on this. How this things work. On Friday, I got a call that says, "Hey, there's a push to get Vincent Brown out and to get Sean Gibbs in." I got this call on Friday. Friday, I was actually out of town on vacation, and I was like, so I spent the rest of my vacation between trying to enjoy myself and looking at my phone and hitting people up and seeing who's going to answer and who's going to give an answer and all these things. Call you on Monday, and you use your resources to help get some clarity for me as well. I've been sweating over this for the last couple of days, so you hate to see somebody lose their job, but that's kind of how these things go. And a lot of stuff kind of goes on underneath the surface. But at HBCU Gameday, we try to keep people informed and let them know what's going on. And so while we're doing that, while we're making calls on one thing, sometimes you hear other things. And another thing that was out there was that not only was this real, some people said that there was a move back to the MEAC. Now, I did not report that on HBCU Gameday in writing because that's a lot. That's a lot. I did not have enough to go out there and say that. It's been out there. The rumor mill is out there. Anything that comes to anybody's mind now because of the internet, you're going to hear about it and it's going to be out there. So, we didn't put that out there. But the chat question came up in the chat. Again, new chancellor, these people are talking. He's listening. What does your gut tell you right now, Lut, about the possibility of North Carolina A&T returning to the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference in some shape or form in the near future?
Well, I think you hit on the two most important factors. Number one, the chancellor, Edwin Martin, is no longer the chancellor. He was the one that was all about A&T moving into becoming a
Harold
research. I'm sorry, Harold Martin becoming
and he likes to move
one.
Conferences. Yeah.
Oh, yes, he does. You know about that from when he was at Winston-Salem State. He was trying to get the Rams to come into the MEAC. So he took that same mentality to North Carolina A&T. Now, the way I got it was that the MEAC had issued a invitation for North Carolina A&T to come back. And because we were chasing this Vincent Brown story so hard, we didn't really get a chance to chase that story as much because like when we were talking about the A&T story, I said, listen, I'll call Earl Hilton. I have a good relationship with Earl Hilton. Let me call him and see if he can give me any indication of what's going on. Didn't get a call back. It's not a problem. There are other sources that we checked into. But yeah, at the root of the discontent was not just the 2-21 record over the last 2 years for Vincent Brown, but also the fact that you've moved two conferences, first to the Big South and then to the CAA under the previous chancellor. And I mean, if you let's say ferret this out, so to speak, there's going to be some discontent with Earl Hilton. So there may be an opportunity, or maybe a situation where Earl Hilton might not be retained in North Carolina A&T. And if that's the case, then you got the two architects of this move, and they sold the move to the board of trustees to get them to okay it. But the two architects of that are gone. And then it's always the things that we don't know. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes with the money, with the when they left going to the CAA, they left going to the Big South. A&T talked about we wanted to have more class time for our athletes there because they had to make 2 trips to Florida. And then they joined a conference that goes to Maine and New Hampshire and Rhode Island and New York and New Jersey. So that went out the window. That was just some hokum. That wasn't any real deal. So you don't leave a conference where you make 2 trips to Florida and now you got to make 8 trips north of New Jersey, So anyway, the bottom line is I would not be surprised if there's some kind of effort afoot. One of the criticisms that I've heard is that he gave Vincent Brown, or Earl Hilton did, a 5-year contract. Not a 4-year contract, not a 3-year contract, but a 5-year contract. And I had several Aggies call me today. Why would you give him a 5-year contract? Because now you're looking at 3 years that you are allegedly or maybe technically trying to buy out, as opposed to a 2-year or maybe a 1-year deal. And that when you talk about a 5 years, it's not a prove me kind of time. Prove me is like get your class in, coach them up or whatever, and see what happens. And I think that was part of it as well. So it wouldn't surprise me that the MEAC, as you know, and I know, and everyone knows, is still looking to reconstitute more than the 6 football playing members that they have. It wouldn't surprise me at all if some overtures have been made in that direction. But again, didn't really get a chance to try to drill down on that, to try to talk to some sources to see if that's real in terms of the MEAC actually inviting them back. Doesn't sound like something that Commissioner Stills would necessarily do, unless there was some indication that A&T is not satisfied with the direction they are in the CAA. And if that's the case, I think you would have heard something more concrete than just the MEAC inviting them back in. So we'll have to see. Maybe we get a chance to look into that, see how real that is.
Yeah. So much there, so much to talk about. I appreciate everybody for tapping in with us. This is HBCU Game Day Live. And so, all right, we spent enough talk about A&T. Enough time talking about A&T for now. We'll get back to them.
Right.
Last week last week I had a couple Aggies, on Twitter that told me I should stop talking about A&T so much and focus on other schools. And that's when I knew it was bad. When the Aggies don't want to be talked about, then something's wrong, because there's nothing more that the Aggies love to talk about than the Aggies. So, we shall see. But I'm not surprised the MEAC wants to spin the block. And we'll see what happens. Excuse me. We'll go ahead and bring in Kris Ferguson, my normal co-host, and we'll have a good conversation about the D2 playoffs. Kris, man, how you doing?
I'm here.
Yeah, man.
It's a long week.
Hey,
Sorry.
that's more than we can say for some other people that were in places last week. They ain't there. Have you been relieved, Kris? Have you been relieved?
No, y'all still got me here, so I must be doing something right.
Yes, Kris, you have not been relieved. But yeah, I'll tell you who else hasn't been relieved yet, and that's Virginia Union. They have not been relieved from the D2 playoffs. So this past week, story written by Lut Williams, contributed for us. He was there on site, as he was the previous week, at Wingate University, where Virginia Union has gotten their first 2 playoff wins in school history. Lut, you were there. Your thoughts on the game and the performance by the Panthers back-to-back weeks, and we'll take them full screen, Cole.
Absolutely electrifying to see the Panthers under Dr. Parker pull off 2 wins obviously both of them on the road. They were the last team in this region to get in of the 7 teams in Super Region 2 of Division 2, but they actually played lights out, and they did it with it's not even a second string quarterback. He's just the backup quarterback. He actually started the season. He came in at the end of the Wingate game down at Wingate and just made play after play. He came in at the beginning of the fourth quarter and made play after play. Two fourth downs, fourth in double digits, fourth and 14, I think, and one was fourth and 15. Escaped the rush, brought them down and threw a touchdown pass with 11 seconds to go to send the game into overtime. And then in the overtime, had an 18-yard run down to the 1-yard line. Eventually went over on a plunge on that tush push to get the win over Wingate. On the road, Wingate was the number 2 team in the region. Virginia Union, as I said, was number 7 in the region. That was a big win, obviously the first one in their history. And then to come back the next week against Lenoir-Rhyne and an absolutely dominating win down in Hickory, North Carolina, 345 rushing yards. Both Jada Byers as well as Curtis Allen both went over 100 yards. It was and actually when I talked to Joe Taylor, the former Virginia Union and Hampton and Florida A&M head coach, and also the AD and now the director of intercollegiate athletics for Virginia Union, they said that they thought the Lenoir-Rhyne game would be easier than the Wingate game, and it was. They really walked over that Lenoir-Rhyne team, both on the offense, both sides of the ball. They stuffed their running game. They had 2 interceptions as well as a couple of fumble recoveries. They ran the ball at will. They threw the ball a 78-yard pass. So it's just been very, very impressive to see what Virginia Union has done. And Coach Dr. Parker, after the game, has said, his quote both times has said is he told people at the beginning of the year that this was a team that could compete for the national championship. And he said people laughed at him. And obviously they lost a couple of games early, and then they lost to Virginia State in the last game of the regular season to force the CIAA championship game. They obviously got it done in the CIAA championship game, a low-scoring game as opposed to the high-scoring game when they lost to Virginia State. But now when you see them play and you see the depth that they play, you see the talent that they have, talent at wide receiver, talent at quarterback, talent on the offensive line, talent on the defensive line, and in the secondary at the linebacker core. It's across the board very, very, very impressive. And as you know, Jada Byers is the workhorse. He's up to around 1,800 yards on the season. He's probably going to be the Black College Player of the Year, at least from the Black College Football Hall of Fame. I think that they're saying it's almost a shoe-in that he's going to win it. And I would give them, I would even say, from my perspective, they maybe be favored to beat Valdosta State, the number 1 team in the country and the number 1 team in this region. That's easy to say, of course. I haven't seen Valdosta State, but what I've looked at in terms of the scores that they've beaten teams, they played 1 CIAA team. They shut out Fayetteville State 34-0 early in the season. But I think it will be competitive, to say the least, and I think Virginia Union has a very good chance of advancing to the Final Four.
Yeah, great insight there, Lut. Again, has been on the field for both games. Kris, I know you've been watching closely, and as your contributor for D2Football.com, I see you guys talking about it. What was your reaction to the game, and what's been the reaction from the D2 community at large in terms of Virginia Union having finally broken through that playoff wall, and they seem to bust through it with Jada Byers, Jada Bowers, Jada Pickett. It didn't matter who was carrying the ball. They just kept crossing the goal line. Just talk to me from your perspective, Kris.
Well, when you look at what VU has been able to accomplish, I think a lot of people have to think about that. This is a team that's been together for some time, and it took them 3 tries to get to this point. But that's kind of the way things go in the CIAA. You make it to the playoffs for the first year, you don't always succeed in getting past the first round. But if you give a team that a nucleus that stays together, a couple of cracks at it, they're able to be successful. And around the D2 landscape, a lot of people know and comment on Jada Byers and what he's able to do, but there's so many other pieces like you guys have talked about that are part of that VUU team. The big difference I would say between what we've witnessed in the past couple of years and this year is that they have a much more consistent passing game. That really has made a difference because it stops these teams from keying in on that run game. And at that point, you really don't know what's going to hit you. At Wingate, they had to pass the ball to win that game, and Lenore Ryan, they got an opportunity to run all over them and trample them in the process. So, you know, and the other thing I'll just mention is a lot of times in football, you win the game in the trenches, right? And I know we've talked about that over the course of the season. The best teams in the conferences, in the two conferences, their offensive and defensive line play is what sets them apart. And VUU's is right up there amongst the tops in the HBCUs when it comes to line play on both sides of the line. So, um, now, Jada Byers, he's now one of the 8 finalists for the Harlan Hill this year. That just came out today. So that's just a testament to what he's been able to do in his career. And, he is the second leading rusher in the country right now. And people have gotten the chance to see that. And they got to see him break loose on the national stage. I think that was just a big deal in the playoffs where you don't have a lot of games to watch. And I've always just felt like, you know, people kind of sleep on the CIAA and the SIC, and now they get to see on a national stage, what what guys are able to do. And I think that just spoke volumes the way he almost rushed for 200 yards last weekend.
He's like the galloping ghost, 21st century version. Um, Yeah, no, great insight there. Again, and we'll talk a little bit more about Virginia Union in a little bit, but we do have some news that we reported on HBCU Game Day. We had a discussion about Valdosta State. Another thing that came across the board this weekend while I'm researching the A&T thing, we hear about Valdosta State potentially joining the SIAC, the possibility of that. And so, I did place a call to Valdosta State. Didn't get the AD immediately. He did call me back today, so I still have to call back and talk to him. But did get a chance to talk to the SIC commissioner, Dr. Holloman, excuse me, and he said that they haven't had any official inquiry from anybody recently. They have had some, in the not too distant past. But, he kind of outlined why it would make sense for a school to be interested in the SIC. And he brought up some great points. Valdosta State is currently in the Gulf South Conference, which a lot of people know as kind of like the SEC of Division Two. But, they have had shifting membership. A lot of their big schools have gone up to FCS. And, coming into this last season, they had 8 football playing schools, but 3 of them are going to join Conference Carolinas, and the other one, they just said to hell with it. No more football, Mississippi College. And so they have been cut in size starting next year. And so, excuse me, guys. And so, the report is that they're looking for a new home. And the SIAC is there. It's within their footprint. The SIC does have a PWI that is part of the conference, Spring Hill College. They don't play football though. And Valdosta State is a national power, consistently. Kris, what's your thought on this, the possibility and the likelihood of this happening?
Well, there's not a whole lot of places for Valdosta State to run right now. That's the problem. I mean, they could go to Conference Carolinas. That's a potential.
It's kind of far though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little far. Once you get past that, I mean, what are you gonna do? Get into home and home deals with the Great Lakes, the Grand Valley states of the world and the Ferris states of the world, and I mean, because they're kind of in the same situation. You know, people have actually like schools have ran from those conferences. And I think it's kind of important to note it's kind of full circle. You know, Valdosta and all those schools are kind of beating up on the Arkansas schools to the point, and the same with the Lone Star, beating up on the Oklahoma schools. And so Arkansas, Oklahoma decided to leave and create their own conference, the Great American Conference, and who is the home of the right now the defending national champion in Harding. Now you got a situation where, you know, do you look at like a West Alabama and a Delta State that's far enough west that they try to pair up and go and join the GAC? And then what happens to West Florida and what happens to Valdosta in a case like that? And so, yeah, man, that's a really tough spot to be in because the geography is just not there to go anywhere
Mhm.
else right now. Um,
Mhm.
Now, you know, I understand people may feel like Valdosta, you know, why would you put them in SIAC? They're going to run over everybody in football. Like, but um, they've had some close calls in terms of potential losses. Like, they've had some close calls against Albany in particular. So, um, you know, it may not be as bad as people think. Valdosta is not this like really rich school that you can like they can move up to the FCS that easily. So I think they're just kind of in a weird spot. You know, I'll just tell you from personal experience attending Valdosta. You
Fake
know,
VSU. Sorry.
there's only one VSU in this corner. That's Virginia State. So we maintain that. But like graduate programs, right? Their enrollment is a very healthy number. But when you're an online student, for example, you're not paying athletic fees. So you know that number that they use to support athletics through athletic fees are they're not as high as you think. And so. Uh, yeah, does it make sense? It could make sense. You know, now will people be happy about it? That's a totally different matter. And does it force schools to elevate their game? I think that's the other piece of that too. That you know could possibly play into it. That you know maybe schools do get better because they get tired of beating about also beating them.
Well, you know,
I think it's well. No, I think that what the point Chris makes is very important, which is, there are not a lot of options. If the GSC is imploding as it appears to be, and where they're down to now, I think 5 schools and maybe even less because some others are considering some other kinds of moves. Um, it only makes sense that that would be out there as an option, whether it's real or not. One of the things I found out was that Valdosta's football coach is a HBCU grad.
hmm
Tremaine Jackson played at Texas Southern, I think, his last 2 years. And again, another thing is a couple of years ago, Virginia Union started off the season. I think it was their first or second game. Went down to Valdosta State, and I asked them after they won last week. I asked Jada Byers, "What do you remember about that game?" He said, "I remember I carried." He said 28. It was actually 32 times for a school record, 319 yards, and I think was it 4 touchdowns or 6 touchdowns? I can't remember. I think it
It was
was.
four.
It might.
it was four,
I think
which he
it's
has since broken both records, by the way, against Bowie
Yeah.
State. Hey, bring it down the Bulldogs. Hey, Clarence.
yeah. So I think that if you look around the landscape of HBCU football, and that's almost across the board, I think that the coaching level and the aptitude of the coaches in the CIAA, the ones that are particularly the ones that are staying around, the ones that are accomplishing things, the ones who are winning. Uh, when you look at the MEAC, even though some changes in the MEAC, two of those coaches are already gone. It's going to be very interesting, and I think that them coming into, if they were to come into the SIAC, I don't think it's going to be that they're going to just beat up on them. I think it will actually raise the level to the degree that they are so-called a Division II football power in particular. I think it would raise the level. These guys, the Quinn Grays of the world and others, the Sam Shades of the world, if they stay at those institutions, are not going to be, like, oh, we are fearing Valdosta State, and despite their history of success on the national level. So I think it's reasonable. Whether they'll pull the trigger on it, it obviously remains to be seen.
Yeah, and we'll get to the coach a second right after this. But first, I do want to remind everybody and thank everybody for watching. Please hit the like button wherever you are. We need all those likes for sure. If you want to send us a super chat, we'll definitely appreciate that too. And I will definitely read your comment if you do. But I would also say too, there's this, Valdosta State's a PWI, right? Let's not dance around that part. There are some people who are fine with Valdosta State playing those Albany State, Fort Valley State, who are in the same Georgia State system, but they're fine with them taking and beating them around. But some of them they don't really want to be, they don't want to associate Valdosta State with those schools. They like to keep themselves up there. So you got a little bit of that going on. And then two, even though Gulf South has been super successful, outside of the D2 world, who has a bigger brand? The SIAC, who is on who has ESPN and HBCU Go deals, or the Gulf South. There's a lot of things. There are a lot of things that would make the SIC attractive to someone, I think, if they could get over that. And I'm sure we will bring Kris back shortly. But yeah, I think and two, the SIC, you got to be proactive because every day there's some internet rumor out that one or more of your schools, some of your marquee institutions, are that they are going to potentially vote for Division I and join the MEAC. So, there's that too. Some of your schools that are more football challenged historically. But we'll get to that in another part. Appreciate everybody
Well,
for watching. Yeah, or Clark Atlanta.
mhm.
But we did talk about coaches, and we talked about coaching potential changes. Um, yeah, we started off talking about a Division I coaching change, but let's look over at the D2 landscape and how this kind of affects it. So we reported earlier again, Vincent Brown is out, but Sean Gibbs it has it it's all but his name is all but on the door at North Carolina A&T from what we're hearing. So that means there's going to be one more opening in the SIAC. That's possible. We know about that. But Kris, we got a new opening in the CIAA. We got a new. Are you saying? Are you in denial, Kris?
I am. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
Why would
let's
you let that man? Why would you let that man start recruiting and then say your services are no longer needed?
Yeah, when I saw the recruiting thing, I thought he was safe. We are talking about Adrian Jones, the now former head coach at Shaw University. He was they I can't remember if that was a parting ways or a relieval. Either way, they're private schools, so kind of a little bit tougher to keep up with that stuff. Either way, Adrian Jones, after 8 seasons at Shaw University, he's no longer there. Um, and I think Kobe, we have his farewell message. Let's see if we can pull that up. Um, we'll see if we can pull that up. But uh, to Shaw U and the Shaw U family, I want to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude for the time, effort, and unwavering support you've shown me during my 10 years as head coach. It has been an incredible journey filled with lessons, growth, new friends, and memories that I will always cherish forever. Although this is not the way I wanted to end my career here at Shaw, it's the way that it will end. However, as I reflect on where I am in my career, I recognize that a transition is necessary for me to continue ascending towards my professional goals. To my players, staff, and community, thank you for your dedication and your belief in our shared vision. It's been an honor to lead this program and to work alongside each of you. And to lighten the mood, I guess you could say I'm officially in the transfer portal. But don't worry, I'll always be a part of this family and I'll be rooting for your continued success from wherever my next step takes me. With gratitude and respect, Coach Adrian Jones. Kris, yeah, we talked about this, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about the Elizabeth City job opening, which is still open. Hearing some names on that one too. I'm hearing some names. We'll get to that. But you said you thought he was safe. Sounds kind of reasonable. 6-4, but they decided to go a different way. Now his overall record, I did the math, 35-45. In 8 seasons, he had Shaw as winning seasons 3 times. He had 3-6-4 records, but he was never able to crack in to the CIAA championship. And he finally, man, Kris, the more I think about it, man, he finally beat Fayetteville State.
Yeah, the year he beats Fayetteville State is the year he gets out. He gets let go.
I don't know. St. Aug is trolling us all somewhere. But Kris, your reaction, to the news and your thoughts there. We'll go ahead and one box of Kobe.
I just think about the fact that St. Aug trying I'm the biggest hater because they probably were going to be that seventh win against Shaw. They certainly would have been favored if the returning team had came back. So, nonetheless, I felt like over the course of the year, Shaw had a lot of flashes of success, and then they kind of they got into that race in the second half of the season, where the top two teams could go to the championship game, and they had that game against Winston State. That didn't end very well. Then they went against JCSU. That didn't end very well, and at 6-4 at that point just felt like a consolation, more than anything. But Shaw has been kind of up and down over the years. It's one of those things where I feel like they sort of epitomize what Division II is, where you have to build a team up, and that's what I felt like you kind of had a couple of times where Coach Jones had to build that team up, and things look pretty promising. Yeah, I didn't realize that Christian Peters had one more season of eligibility at quarterback. I think he had found some studs at running back, and really, the defense kind of let them down a little bit this year. But I'm pretty sure that would have been an area that they would have been focusing on in the offseason. 8 years. Y'all talked about contracts. Contracts in the CIAA are 3 to 4 years. So between thinking about that and the way that the university worded their message, it feels like he was relieved. The university has decided to part ways with. It feels very one-sided. Coach Jones, definitely has. He's had a lot of success as a head coach, despite the overall record. I know he will find a landing place. Will it be Elizabeth City or somewhere else? He will find a landing place, and he will continue to do great things. I'm just now thinking, who do you really put there at Shaw? That's a great question. I don't know, but yeah, I just it was very surprising. I thought that he had did enough to continue to stay there.
Yeah, great insight there. I will say the AD over at Shaw has changed from when he first got there, and I think that's always important to note. The AD at Shaw University right now is George Knox. He came over from Winston-Salem State in 2020, and so he had been there for quite a while. He's a WSSU alumnus, and I don't know, Luke. I mean, maybe it was just time for him to make his hire. Your thoughts on the move of Coach Jones and kind of how these things go again when you kind of have a change in athletic director and football coaches, that alignment, how important that is.
Well, there used to be a saying that patience is a virtue. But when you see three coaches, and we haven't really talked other than Vincent Brown, we only talked about him on the FCS level, but three coaches were fired after only 2 years. When you talk about Lee Hall, when you talk about Vincent Brown, and you also talk about Kendrick Wade down in Mississippi Valley. And interestingly, how about all three of them had 2-21 records, 2 wins in 2 seasons? Yeah, yeah, for real, Kris. They each had 2 wins, and I thought that patience was a virtue, and even in the case of Adrian Jones, uh, I'd have to look to when to see the last time Shaw won a championship under any coach. I don't know how far it goes back, but it's been quite a while.
2010,
2010,
20
2010.
Okay,
Osbury.
14, yeah, 14 years. Okay, and to actually, I think, be in contention as Shaw has been. I think they've over the last 8 years that he's been there, they've been, I think, certainly in the running in the South. And remember, the South was basically controlled by Fayetteville State for 6 years. So,
Ooh, the
um,
Dark Ages.
uh, yeah, how about that? How about that? I know that's what how the Rams feel, but 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 like I think you were surprised that Robert Massey continued at Winston Salem State. And listen, after some what I would call mediocre or below par years, he had a good year this year.
Which
He was in
what
the mid.
you would call? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lee. Don't get
No,
me
but I'm
started.
saying that you would have to acknowledge that at least it was an improvement over what they had been before. They beat some teams they hadn't beaten in a while. They were in the mix longer than they had been. I know it's hard, Steve, but listen, my point is that patience is a virtue, and that all of these decisions showing no patience. Dawson Oldhams was a good coach at Norfolk State. He proved that in 8 years down at Southern. They only gave him, what was it, 4 years, I guess, before he was out. Connell Maynor down was in, I think, 7th or 8th year down at Alabama A&M. Bubba McDowell was in was it second or third year? On his second year at Prairie View A&M. What
Third year,
happened
third
to
year. Hmm.
was it third? Well, I think one of the years he was maybe an interim, maybe
Right,
only
right,
last two
right.
years. Right. So my point is that, all of these changes, and listen, I understand that there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of realignment going on across college football, but it seems like that people are moving a little too quickly. Maybe everybody wants to catch that lightning in a bottle that Jackson State did with Deion Sanders, and now Tennessee State appears to be doing with Eddie George. And it would not surprise me to see some of these prominent NFL names come up for some of these positions. Maybe not somewhere like a Shaw, but certainly in the FCS jobs. And I think before it's over, we may talk about one of them, one of those very big names that's being bandied about coming down to Norfolk State.
Yeah, okay, Mr. Green. What's your deal? I mean, hey, you tuned into us. Respectfully. We didn't even I don't think anybody says experts under here. We're just talking what we know. We talk to people, we a little experience. But anyway, yeah, I hear you, Luke. Patience is a virtue. A
Yeah,
virtuous a virtuous athletic department who can find. Okay, I get it. But there's this thing called expectations. All right? There's this thing called monkey see, monkey do. There's this, and I have to. We'll take Shaw for example. Okay, Shaw, their football program went away for a while, came back, and they were pretty much immediately successful. Won some CIAA championships, even when North Carolina Central was in the CIAA. Broadway and them took a back seat to Shaw for a couple years. And so they've had some wins. They're not Winston-Salem State, but they've had some wins. And you look at them being a private school, and the private schools in the CIAA have struggled in this quarter century, probably even longer than that. But there was a time where Shaw was at least here, and then you had Johnson C. Smith and Livingstone. But now, when you look at Johnson C. Smith, I feel like Johnson C. Smith is a barometer. You look at Johnson C. Smith, they've been bad at football pretty much since 1892. I mean, you know, they've, you know, they got a championship in 1969, but they got one champion, and even this year, 8 wins, and then they fell off a cliff. Johnson C. Smith passed them. Livingstone passed them. Livingstone, Livingstone, they had the same record as Livingstone this year. They beat Livingstone this year, but I mean, so when you look at it comparatively to that, when you look at the neighborhood, and I like Coach Jones, a lot of respect for him, I always have, but I feel like we hit that 6-4 ceiling, and that seems like that's the ceiling. It's been the ceiling, and I look at Shaw compared to Johnson C. Smith. Raleigh and Charlotte are comparable. Charlotte's a little bit bigger, but there's a lot you can sell there in Raleigh, I would say. And I don't know. Maybe it's just time for something new. It's time for some regime change. And I think, Coach Jones. I think they gave him time. They gave him 8 years. I mean, what are you going to do? So I think it's time for him to get a fresh start. Coach Gibbs, who may be making the move, he might need a defensive backs coach. He knows a lot. He's got a lot of friends in this industry. He's been in this industry a long time. I think he'll find the best fit for him. If you're Shaw, and you're a new AD, how long? You're the AD. How long do you wait before you bring in your guy? I don't know. Maybe to me, I get again when Johnson C. Smith starts beating you, then you got to look yourself in the mirror. And right now, what they've done with Coach Flowers, I think everybody had to say, well, if they can do it over there, damn it, why can't we? My thoughts.
That's a good point. I think you make good points.
These and these,
8 years.
I found out these private schools, they're very competitive with each other.
Yeah. Look at Dr. Parker, Virginia Union, 7 years. And he's had failures. They were also, bad losses in the playoffs. Like they weren't even competitive. And then, as Kris mentioned, they have a team. Many of those same guys that have taken those losses over the last 2 years are still on the team now. They've learned from those losses. I love when Coach Parker says, we don't look at them as losses. We look at them as lessons with something from us to learn from those losses. And we have learned from them and implemented the things we think we needed to do to make sure we have a different outcome. So it's going to be exciting to watch. And Kris, what do you think about their chances against Valdosta State?
Well, I think the chances are certainly there. I mean, they will be coming into this game as the underdog, no doubt about that. But there are some things that VUU does really well. I saw a quote online that says they'll take what the other team's giving them, and they have the flexibility to adjust as necessary. Just look at the quarterbacks. When you look at RJ Rosales, who started the last game, he's more of a runner. But if they need a little bit more pocket presence, you go to Mark Wright for that. Look at what they do at running back. The same thing, Jada Byers, he's patient. He can find the right hole. But, if you need a change of pace back, the way Curtis Allen has played the last two, well, really all season, he is a feature running back. And so I just think it's one of those things where, Union has to do exactly that. They need to be able to run the ball. They need to do just enough to keep Valdosta's defense unbalanced and shorten the game and not let, Valdosta knows how to put up points. There's no doubt about that. Where they're going to probably see some struggles initially is, Valdosta's like top 5 in scoring defense. And they've got to find ways to, get something on the board. VU does. And then VU has to do what they've been doing over the last 3-4 games is, they're probably going to give up some passing plays, but their red zone defense and being able to limit teams to field goals if they're going to give something up instead of touchdowns, that's really beneficial in a game like this. And so, I like Union's chances. I actually picked them to win on the D2 football's national show on Sunday. So, but it will not be easy. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch either way.
Yeah, not really great stuff there. As we look forward to the playoffs, and bringing it back to the coaches because that's kind of the hot topic. Yes, 1892. Yes, one championship. Great, good year this year though. So yeah, we'll talk about the coaching carousel again. So we could see Gibbs out there. He might not be the only SIC coach that could get called up to the majors, if you would. Connell Maynard, a legendary D2 coach in his own right, that man was relieved, fired, sent on his way.
You need to
Um,
leave.
yeah, he's now a free agent, so there's some people that are saying, hey, maybe he wants to come home to the CIAA. Maybe, and there's a couple different ways that could go. But Sam Shade, we talked about him previously, but now Miles is done with their football season. Their playoff run is over with. And then you also got Teddy Keaton over there at let me slip up and say that.
Clark
You've
Atlanta.
got Clark
Atlanta.
Atlanta. But Prairie View has an opening. Mr. Jackson, I'm told, is high on their list, from what I understand, but maybe he's not ready to make that move yet, or maybe he doesn't think Prairie View is high on his. I'm hearing Keaton's name in there for the job as well at Prairie View. What are your thoughts on these SIAC coaches? And I'm also hearing that even though it hasn't necessarily been announced, there's another vacancy in the northern part of the SIAC over in Ohio. Cedric, I'm sorry. Yeah. So there's, so there's so much
Kevin.
going on over Kevin Porter.
Yep.
I'm hearing that he's out over at Central State. So the SIAC of the two D2 leagues, it has seen the more turnover. Who would be the more devastating loss, Kris, in your eyes? Sean Gibbs, Sam Shade, or Teddy Keaton?
Well, Teddy Keaton. I mean, because remember, Clark went winless, right? They had a legendary coach in their own right before Teddy Keaton. Couldn't do a whole lot of much at Clark. He comes in, gives them 7 wins, and if he leaves, man, it's like basically Clark goes back into irrelevancy at that point. And so, the other two are losses, but those are still attractive jobs at the Division II HBCU level. But to me, I think that's by far Keaton.
And Luke, for you, Gibbs teams, his the records have been they were 8-2 his first season, 8-3 last season with the bowl win. Now they went down to, I think, 7-3 this year, 6-4. I do understand that they are working with about half of the scholarships that are allowed at Division II. So they're kind of working with their hand tied behind their back. I don't know if that's maybe the job you want to fill in the SIAC. When you talk about that, but how big would it be for Sam Shade to go from Miles? And do you think maybe he could do kind of a Chennis Berry, take some of those Miles guys with him, and going over to the SWAC and see if he can't swag it up?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Chennis Berry has given D2 coaches the blueprint: win on the D2 level, and then take your talented players, your all-conference players, bring them over to Alabama A&M, and turn around that program overnight. What he did at South Carolina State, and if that's exactly what Teddy Keaton did at Clark Atlanta. They didn't go from being winless to playing in the championship game. The main reason was because he brought players from Allen that ended up being all conference player of the year candidates, leading the conference in receiving and passing and other statistical categories by doing that. So yeah, I think Alabama A&M would be very smart to go after somebody like a Sam Shade, and it would be very smart of Sam Shade because look, Miles' team is a team of underclassmen. They don't have a lot of seniors. We've been looking with the Legacy Bowl, trying to pick players for the Legacy Bowl. We couldn't pick many Miles players because they don't have a lot of seniors or grad seniors. There are a lot of underclassmen. Their defense was lights out. They played very well. And offensively, they put up points, and they actually gave, late in the game, they actually gave Valdosta State somewhat of a run for its money. 33-17, I think, was the final score. But it certainly is a blueprint that I think these guys could follow if they decide. So I've heard everything from Henry Frazier to Norfolk State. I've heard Dr. Parker to Norfolk State, which I doubt is going to happen. He's very wedded to Joe Taylor and that whole his in terms of attending Virginia Union. We talking. I think one of your persons already put up Michael Vick to Norfolk State. Michael Vick to Norfolk State would be similar to Deion Sanders to Jackson State. His name alone would bring people who could tell them the same way that Deion tells them. I can get you ready for the NFL. You come here and you play at Norfolk State, you could play at the NFL. Now, how much that is true, that name has been thrown out there. And, we've heard people like Ray Lewis being interested in the Southern job when it was open a couple of years ago. We've heard
Ed Reed might be interested in all these jobs. Ed Reed,
you might be right.
Ed Reed to Shaw. I'm putting it out there right now. Ed Reed to Elizabeth City State.
Yeah. I agree with you, Chris. Not about to happen. Yeah, Bethune-Cookman. I don't think they want to go to the Division II level actually, but we'll see. But it'll be very interesting to see if how many of these jobs are going to be filled by. But I mean, Bubba McDowell was an NFL player. Chris Dishman at Texas Southern is a former NFL player. That seems to be the trend now to maybe go in that direction. So we just have to see. It's going to be very interesting to see how they fill these openings.
Yeah, and then you swing over to CIAA. Of course, we got the two openings right now. We'll see what happens with there. A name I got thrown today, who's interested in becoming a head coach, is and there's some people that are interested in him. Torrey Woodbury, the special teams coordinator over at Howard. He's a Super Bowl champion special teams coordinator with the Los Angeles Rams. Before that, he was offensive coordinator at Johnson C. Smith at Delaware State the last time they had a winning record. And yeah, he went to Winston-Salem State, I think, where he's won some championships.
Yeah, you
played in the NFL.
You think?
So, a guy like him, he's a guy, you talk about NFL, you talk about somebody who's coached at the HBCU level. Could you guys see maybe potentially a Torrey Woodbury God, it pains me to say him at another CIAA school, but at Elizabeth City or at a Shaw? I think I don't know. I think Torrey Woodbury and Raleigh. I think that would be kind of interesting. What do you guys think?
Chris, you first.
Well, I'm just kind of wondering who would take the ECSU job after they canned one of their own, right?
It wasn't the AD's on though, Chris, and he was not. His contract ended. They did part ways. His contract ended.
Yeah. The university decided not to offer him another contract, but Elizabeth City is, the cover was there when Marcus Hilliard got there, and they were really like a few plays away from having a winning season this year. They lost to Lincoln by 1, for example, Shaw by 6. Like, who's going to take that job? It just baffles me. I don't know.
Ed Reed, I'm telling. Ed Reed.
You know who took that job before was a guy by the name of Anthony Jones, who left Alabama A&M very unceremoniously, who had actually won a championship in the SWAC, contrary to Connell Maynard, whose only championship was in the tainted COVID year.
Oof.
They got rid of Anthony Jones, and he came to Elizabeth City. And I think after 2 years, he was like, no, it's not for me. This is not for me, baby. And he moved on. So listen, $80,000-$90,000 a year job can be attractive to a whole lot of people.
Hilliard was making 100. He was making 100K at least.
Okay, even 100,000. That ain't bad money for a football coach. You can do a whole lot worse. So I don't doubt that they're gonna have plenty of. In fact, as soon as the job came open, I got some calls and said, "Do you have DeVos' number? Because I got some people I want to recommend." So I think it's going to be interesting to see when they picked Anthony Jones with the background and the pedigree he had, the resume he had. Really thought it would be good, but again, they didn't have very much patience in the situation. So I understand what Kris saying when he's saying who's going to really want to go there, but I don't know. I think that there will probably be less interest in Shaw because at least Elizabeth City is a state school; it's not a private school. And maybe the resources there are a little better than they might be at Shaw. So it's going to be interesting.
That's saying a lot, man. That is saying a whole lot.
Hey, Shaw had the name on the back of their jerseys, and the CIAA, that means you got money. Don't play with that. Don't play with that. Shaw had. Don't let Shaw fool y'all and make them think that they don't got money. Willie Gary, he probably still writing them checks. Don't let Shaw fool y'all. They down there on that downtown real estate. Shaw has some things working in its favor.
So let me just say, Luke, that the only concern I had about Elizabeth City is not about like the coaching salary is comparable to what you would find at Division II schools. My concern is the support that you will have from the assistant coaches pool of money. Because sometimes you have these schools that are relying on like volunteer coaches, and you're not going to draw in. There's a ceiling on the talent that you're able to bring in a scenario like that to win. So my concern was less about the salary that the head coach is going to make, and more about like, do they know what they're getting themselves into, does a job like that end up being kind of a career killer or set you back? That's the concern I kind of have in a place like that.
Is the curse of Waverly Tiller real?
Yeah.
Until they do right by him. Will things ever go right at 252 State University? What do you guys think about? Okay, so this is another name that's coming up. We got to talk about it again. Another former WSSU quarterback, even though his degree, he finished up at that other school, so I don't know if you want to count him. But Connell Maynard, a lot of success at CIAA, brilliant offensive mind. He just hasn't. Since him and Bill Hayes went their separate ways, things just haven't been the same anymore. Maybe it's the return to the CIAA. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys think that's possible, or you think Maynard's done with the CIAA, and he'll just wait for a coordinator job, or maybe take some time off? He's gonna get some type of package because he was definitely.
Will he come back and join Sean Gibbs at A&T as maybe the offensive coordinator? Come back to his alma mater? I think that's a real possibility. I would think. I know he's from Fayetteville. Going down.
They always need an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, well, going down to Alabama A&M. Yeah, going down to Alabama A&M was really out of his footprint, so to speak, in terms of the way he played and coached. And he went down there. Like I said, he had some success early, particularly with the quarterback as a two-time conference player of the year and won the abbreviated season in the COVID year. I think that was the high point. That's when they renewed his contract. But since then, he hasn't really threatened. He's been overshadowed really by the Jackson States of the world, particularly with Dion there, and overshadowed might be an understatement in terms of what happened with him and Dion. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him come back. Maybe to come back in A&T in some kind of co-head coach or assistant head coach role. That he could be a coordinator. I think that probably makes more sense, is more likely than maybe taking one of these Division II jobs.
Why do you want to? I mean, if you want to be an offensive coordinator in a triad, there's other schools.
That he's got a connection. That he's got a connection.
No. I say that in jest. When the news popped out, I posted the news in the WSSU, our alumni group, and I already knew what was gonna happen. I like to keep it a little fun, a little spicy. It's a little quiet these days. So yeah, there were people clamoring for him. But I did do a video on my other page, WSSU Ram Nation, where I talked about, they would roll a red carpet out for him. Some of them folks, man, he could come, to paraphrase and make an analogy, he could come home smelling like anything else, and they would still want Connell Maynard to be their head coach. That's how good it was when he left. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But this is any other guys that we should keep an eye on for you guys as we finish up here, or any other spots?
Well, the question is, are there any more jobs that are going to come open? I really didn't expect that they would move off of Lee Hall so quick at Delaware State. I really did not expect that. I thought, again, this is a quality guy, a guy who's been in the NFL. I thought, much like Jerry Mack, who just got hired at Kennesaw State, he left the HBCU world, went to the NFL, came back to the college world, as did Jerry Mack. Jerry Mack's coming back now at Kennesaw State. I think that's the scenario that I think Willie Simmons is looking for. I understand his name was in the mix down at Kennesaw State, and his name is also in the mix at one of the openings in Florida, if I'm not mistaken.
FIU,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, the reason he left FAM was because he's looking for the kind of job that Jerry Mack just landed, which is maybe salary-wise at least a step or maybe 2 or 3 steps above what you're going to get in the FCS.
$750K a year. $750K a year.
4 or 5 steps, maybe I should have said, above what's happening on the HBCU level. So I think that's what Willie Simmons had in mind. And I don't doubt that that's what Connell Maynard had in line had he been very successful at Alabama A&M. But obviously, I think that door is closed. So maybe coming back, maybe one of the Division II jobs may be attractive to him to rebuild his resume, so to speak.
All right, guys. So when we go to Media Day this year, we're going to play a game. How many new coaches, because I know, Lut, you and I have done this at the SIC before. How many new coaches will there be in the SIC come July? Both of you guys got to give me your guesses.
Because you're saying Central State is gone. If you're saying Central State is about to come open, if you're saying Lane is already open, that's 2 right now. If he leaves Fort Valley, that's 3. Morehouse coaches in his first year. Mathis is in his first year.
Well, that didn't stop him from firing the other guy, but anyway,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, but I assume that they may be one that will exercise some patience since he's got an NFL. Terrence Mathis had a long-term NFL career. And like you said, Sam Shade maybe get the offer to go to somewhere like Alabama A&M. I'll say at most in the SIC 5. I'd say at the most 5 new coaches by the time we get to Media Day. At the most 5.
Kris, you going 5?
3. I was going for 3.
Okay, wow.
So you got so you're saying no more? You don't think any more moves are going to be made because there's 3 out there now?
I don't think so. Yeah.
You don't think Sam Shea?
Yeah.
So you think Sam Shea stays put? You think Teddy Keaton stays put? Okay. And in the CIAA, let's have some fun with that. Do we stick with these two, or is there something else up somebody's sleeve?
3. I think 3. One of the Virginia schools, I think, is going to lose a coach.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that based on the results over the past couple of years, I it's a little early, but Bowie State has kind of fallen from the top of the heap down to below the 2 Virginia schools. I don't think they like that. I think that if Damon Wilson can do it, why can't one of his other guys do it? I don't see any indication immediately that they're going to move off of Kyle Jackson, but Livingstone appears to be on the rise. Winston-Salem State appears to be on the rise. Johnson C. Smith certainly appears to be on the rise. I guess I don't know. Did you say 3 or did you say 2, Kris?
3.
3. You think that one of the Virginia schools? It wouldn't surprise me. I think that Henry Frazier would jump at the opportunity to go to Norfolk State. So I'll stick with 3. I don't know who it's going to be, but I'll say 3. I said 5 in the SIAC, 3 in the CIAA.
All right. Well, a great discussion. I appreciate everybody for tapping in with us. Appreciate Lut for joining the fray and giving us his insight from seeing those games. Appreciate Kris, as always, for doing his thing and giving his perspective. You know, they won 6 games. You know, throw them a party.
It's unheard of for the Blue Bears.
You know, it's been quite a while. So just remember to offer a message for all my coaches. Get off the internet. Don't follow me. Forget all my memes. Kris, let them see your shirt. That's the thing with Lut. We didn't will you in on the shirts, but yes. So give Kobe loves to check out the shirt. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. Please make sure that you guys share this and comment and hit the like button before, and hopefully we'll get a chance to have Lut back on again sometime soon with us. I think this was fun. Appreciate you guys so much. And shout out to Kobe behind the boards up there in Delaware where things are crazy. Who knows? Maybe he'll be the next coach at Delaware State. We'll go ahead.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, Kobe. Send him to the credits. It's SJG D2 HBCU football.
Sleep on Livingstone if you want to, and they can really punish you for it.
Fayetteville State, you know, they're never sexy, but they won.
Sometimes we have to eat our crow. And I got to eat my crow this week, okay?
Doom alert. Yeah, we're back at Heartbreak Hotel, and we're checking back in.